everyone. I am delighted to say I'm going to be joined by the model, entrepreneur, and nutritionist, and founder of the Be Well Collective, Sarah Ann Macklin. I haven't met her before, and I'm really looking forward to talking to her. I've just invited her, and it didn't seem to do anything. Let's try again. Invite. There we are. See what happens. Is she going to join me? Hope she's there. She's there. Are you there? There's Sarah. She's waving at me. There we are. There she is. Sorry about that, everybody. I've accepted her. She still hasn't joined. Sorry, Sarah. I don't know what's going on. I keep inviting you. Sarah is unable to join. I wonder why that is. Accept. What on earth's going on? Sorry, everybody. This is always such a nightmare when it doesn't work. There you are.
You know, it's always this really odd thing of lives where whenever I invite someone on for a live, it seems to take like a couple of minutes, and the other person I think is just sat there saying, I've requested, and then it accepts, but it takes a couple of minutes. So there's always this really odd place in the
I know, there's this liminal, disconnected place, but I could see that you were there. And what a delight that you've joined me. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I'm thrilled. Before we kind of start, and I want to talk about so many interesting things, do you want to introduce yourself? I mean, I've given broad titles, but do you want to say from you who you think you are to the people that already know you, your followers, but my followers who may not know you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you first of all for having me on. It's a real delight, and really great to actually connect with you properly. Well, I guess my name, for any followers that don't know me from my platform, my name's Sarah Ann Macklin. I am an associate registered nutritionist, and I am previously, still saying I still am because I'm still signed and still shooting, but a fashion model. And that led me to actually going to study nutritional science and biochemistry and become a registered nutritionist. And I've been working in clinical now for about 5 years.
Wow.
And that led me to further look at my studies and look around the psychology of eating disorders, which is something that obviously was quite close to my heart because I was in the fashion industry, and we all know that that doesn't always have the best rep with a healthy, balanced diet. So I think that's why my vision towards nutrition went more down that side, and that led me to then start my not-for-profit organisation called the Be Well Collective. And we started off supporting young adults in the fashion and creative industries, but now we support all young adults across the UK for mental health services. So a bit about me.
So interesting. And it's always incredibly powerful when your lived experience informs the paths that you take and the choices that you make. And that so from your experience as being a model, you could really see how nutrition and food and our relationship with food, and we all have a relationship with food, affects our well-being and our health and our mental health.
Yeah.
And I guess I mean, there's so much I'd love to talk to you about, but maybe to start with, it feels to me that the terrible thing about COVID is that whatever difficulty or fault line we had before, that it was amped up during COVID. So can we maybe start with you, as you kind of personally and professionally over the last 20 months, how did it play its horrible game with you?
With me personally or with my business?
Yeah, with you personally, and then we'll talk about the business.
With me personally, well, I guess my personal life runs deeply with my professional life, because for me, I embody, not that that's a healthy thing, but embody a lot of my work because I'm really passionate about it. So I feel very lucky and grateful that I've actually found a career that I get up and I enjoy every single day. I guess with everybody, with COVID, that completely stopped. You know, our daily routine stopped. Going to the office, seeing people in clinic, patients in clinic, this all stopped. So there needed to be, for me, kind of there was a scare, a moment of there's a lot of change, and how do I cope with this change?
How do I pivot? How do I make the business work?
Yeah. And there's, we're real, humans don't like change. Our brains are lazy, and we're kind of real creatures of comfort. So kind of having that realization of, wait, hang on, I'm not going to see my patients face to face. I'm not going to be seeing kind of the team every day in the office, or having my board meetings. How is that going to work with my relationships with people I work with? And so there was kind of a lot of worry and a lot of anxiety, I think, in the beginning.
And so much not known.
So much unknown. And I think, everyone went through this. I mean, it wasn't different from the norm. But I think it did really kind of make me realize actually how much of a social creature personally I am, and I gain a lot of energy from other people. So there was a real kind of pivoting moment of, okay, I've got to adapt now. But a lot of positives actually came out of it, because I started a podcast, which now we're, 2 years down the line, 7 seasons in. It's now one of my favorite things that I do, and I've managed to connect with loads of people. So actually that was one way of me reaching more of a connection, and delivering information, which is something that I have, something that I do a lot of, and I find really important to deliver factual based information to people. So through that, the pivot, the change, actually really beautiful occurred. But there was definitely times of like high anxiety and worries around the adaptation process to that. But I think at the same time, that's only how you get growth. So yeah. So for me personally, there was up and down in how I felt. But I think in the end, it was very actually beneficial.
It is discomfort. Like you said, we're lazy, and we like the familiarity of old habits, and we follow down the same old pathways, even if they're not that good. But it sounded like that you have a capacity to feel the discomfort, and you really like being physically with people, but you're also creative. So you kind of used that to develop, and then in fact, you got stronger through it. And that is one of the kind of unknowns about change, is that, we're born with neuroplasticity to change and grow. And the things that we do to block that are in the end the things that harm us. So when you can go with the distress of it, if you like, the discomfort, we can expand. And it sounds like you've expanded your business and yourself personally. But what have you learned that you can use that, say, with your patients or on your podcast? Are there things from that you're, like you said, I like giving out information. I like letting people know stuff.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I guess everyone is so unique. I guess the thing with nutrition, everyone is unique. And I really believe that in who we are as people and our personalities, especially how I've adapted to change, is not going to necessarily work for somebody else. But I would say, don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of the challenges that kind of come your way. A lot of the time, we can be faced with these, and actually sometimes just be moving blissfully through life and actually not challenging ourselves. And through COVID, it taught us that, we had no choice. We had to go head on into this. And it makes you change. It makes you kind of adapt to the situation that you're in. And now I think we've kind of come out of it. Well, we're not out of it, but we've kind of come through the very first realization of shock. Yeah. And we've started to learn actually that we can adapt. And actually sometimes through those adaptations, benefits can happen. And it's the same with someone comes to see you for a lifestyle change or looking at their nutrition. You have to also do it slowly, and you have to be very kind with yourself and reflect on how you feel, and not be scared of those emotions. And if you try to give somebody a full lifestyle change in one session, a few weeks later, they're just going to go straight back to how they were, because it's too much. Your brain essentially is quite a lazy organ, and it doesn't like to do too much to try and change. Whereas if you try to do it slowly, you're more likely to have more of a productive outcome. So I think, there's always this thing, especially I have this, when COVID hit and you just think, oh my gosh, everything is over. How am I going to cope? And you try and deal with everything in one sector. And actually you're like, you can't. It's physically impossible. And
overwhelming. It's too much.
Yeah. And once you get to that realization of, actually, I can't do all of this in one go, but if I break this up in segments and I look at this over a period of time, like, this is much more actionable for change. And so I think that's how I try to relay a lot of things to my patients, is don't try and do everything in one go. like really try and look at why you want to make change is the biggest thing, and how you can break that down so it's accessible. So.
And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because it's not kind of looking at the wall and thinking you have to kind of find a way of getting over that wall that you need to kind of reach, but tiny steps have small, manageable, bite-sized chunks have very big outcomes over time.
Definitely.
So, I mean, to get to the nutrition, I'm torn between thinking about New Year and that awful thing of resolutions, but also our relationship with food. Let's start first with our relationship with food and how that, you know, it's a core need, food, and we use it in so many different ways other than just sustenance to keep us going.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that, our relationship with food, and what you've learned, and what are the difficulties and what are the things that help us in changing them?
Yeah, it's such a big topic.
Yes, okay, I agree.
I mean, I'd love also, like, you know, interactions from, you know, everyone who's listening, like, what have they struggled with? What is everyone's kind of worries that they've had? Because obviously New Year heightens a lot of kind of, as you said, New Year's resolutions and kind of demands that we have to have this perfective start to the new year, which sets a lot up for failure and puts a lot of stress on ourselves. So the food side of things is such an important side to your kind of health, because not only does it, yes, create fuel for your body, which is kind of its primary resource, but it also has so many different interconnections with how you're feeling mentally, how much energy can you give out, your concentration, your mood, your emotions. It has a real full holistic view. Even if you're tired, that's going to change how you're eating throughout the day, because it's changing, you know, your hunger hormones to suit your energy demands. So first of all, it's becoming like very much into your body with how you're feeling. I think a lot of us sometimes just look at food as a fuel, but actually what is it that we really need? What do we kind of need to cater for ourselves? And that's when everyone is so different. But when we look at food and mental health, which is something that I'm very passionate about myself, you know, surrounding myself at the very beginning in an industry that didn't look at food for mental health, that obviously food was kind of seen as something that you didn't want to kind of consume too much of because it changes
you should just avoid. Food is a bad thing.
Exactly. You know, that actually kind of creates a really negative emotions, not only with the food that you're eating, but with this awful feeling of shame and guilt. And, you know, that's such a heavy feeling to constantly carry around with you all the time. So all of a sudden you're creating this negative energy with yourself and your self-worth, but then you're also not fueling your brain, you're not fueling your skin, like your biggest organ in your body, your hair. So all of these things actually starts to decline. Like your age increases, your energy decreases, you know, your metabolism becomes quite messed up. And so there's so many different elements to actually not feeding and nourishing your body correctly. And that's why trying to deliver this information around, you know, busting fad diets and bringing awareness to actually what you need is really important, because the right diet doesn't cure things like depression and anxiety, but it can definitely certainly help. And if you're not activating these areas that can actually really support you, you will notice a fundamental difference. So it's about just trying to give that information out and say, actually, like, how does your overall diet look? Like if you write it down in a day, you know, how many different varieties of plant-based foods are you eating? How much protein are you actually getting in your diet? How much of your food in the day is processed? Like how much is from the ground, from the sea, from the farm? Like, or how much is actually packaged in a packet into your body? Like how many nutrients are you actually gaining? And so
can I just pause just to remind people, do ask Sarah a question about your own eating habits and maybe the New Year's resolution. But what I'm getting from you is that food is so much more than fuel, because it's not just our psychological relationship with it, which is a terrible kind of boom or bust thing, is that if you try and kind of starve yourself as you would as a model or whatever industry that wants you to look a particular way, you then of course binge because you can't possibly maintain it. But also it affects our confidence and our belief in ourselves, but also it affects our mood. So food and mood is a huge thing. So as you're saying, it doesn't alleviate depression, but actually having a bad balance of, say, too much processed food, too much sugar, will crash. And that also then we hate ourselves and have this shame, and that will affect our level of depression.
Yeah,
And so it kind of, it has so many things that it links into. And I think what you're saying is that we need a diet that is kind of full of variety and is not processed, basically.
absolutely. I mean, if you really break it down, you know, you look at the importance of fiber, and it's like something we don't talk about because it's just not a sexy thing to talk about. But like,
Yeah.
fiber should be spoken about. It should be sexy. You know, it's what feeds your gut microbiome, and everyone on here, I'm sure, has heard about the importance of your gut health to your mental well-being. You know, the kind of
80, I think it's 80%, someone correct me, of your serotonin, which is your kind of
90,
feel-good hormone. Is it 80? 90
90%.
is made in your gut biome.
It's really high, and so you know you have to feed that. So you've got to feed the microbiome, and that are making all these neurotransmitters. You know, that's really important because they're actually made in your gut, and then they cross the blood-brain barrier to support your everyday functioning for mental health. And then if you look at things such as omega-3s, and that's kind of a real passion for mine. It's what I talk about all the time. For anyone who follows me, you know that I talk about it constantly. And it's where my research started. Is because, you know, our cell membranes are made up of these longer chain omega-3 fatty acids, and these can only actually be sourced from oily fish. And the reason why is because the oily fish get it from the algae. So if you don't eat the oily fish, which is like your salmon and your mackerel and your herring and your sardines, then you're not helping replenish these essential fatty acids that our cell membranes are made up of. And so what they do is start sourcing other fats that are more harder and inflexible. And that does have a real impact on our mental well-being. So if you're somebody that's maybe doing like vegan January, plant-based eating, going onto a specific diet, and you're not having oily fish, then this is something actually that's really important for our overall mental well-being. So all of these different dimensions play such a big part in how we feel. And so actually understanding that is really, really essential. So that's why, you know, an overall balanced diet is actually really important. And if it's not, then seeing what you might be missing out on and actually how can you gain that elsewhere.
So Poppy is asked, is there a way to check your gut health to see what you lack in?
So there's not a way to check specifically what you're lacking. Like, it's not like you can go and do a blood test, but you can go and see a nutritionist. And if you keep a food diary, a good nutritionist will automatically be able to see, are you eating a good range of diverse foods within your diet? They can also, you know, see if they have any problems there with your gut health. So they might refer you to a gastroenterologist to do a coloscopy to see if there's anything there, or somebody like a dietitian might be able to look and see if you have IBS. And these are just where male absorption issues might come in. So if you're not absorbing your food correctly, then that would be a gut health issue. And so there's obviously a wide variety of things that might occur within the gut. So that's why it's really important to sit down with a nutritionist and go through a full medical history. And to look at the food diary to see actually how can we kind of optimize your diet, what would you be lacking in, and is there any testing that might be needed or any other referrals that could be helpful for you.
Fantastic. Anita Merchant has asked, what happens to people who are vegetarian and don't eat fish? And then a kind of extra question from What the Rocks, are daily omega-3 supplements enough? I guess those two are linked, those questions.
Yeah, really good. So so if you're a vegetarian or you just simply don't like fish, because you might be a meat eater or a pescatarian and just hate oily fish, it's quite a common thing actually, the taste of oily fish, and people just can't stand. So if you are
allergic, Liz is allergic.
Exactly, so allergic to shellfish and oily fish and things like that, which is kind of a very kind of common concern, then what you want to be looking at is algae supplements. So when I was talking about why only oily fish have these longer chain omega-3 fatty acids, and they're called EPA and DHA, and these are different to the omega-3s that you'll see on vegetarian products that say high in omega-3, which is chia seeds and walnuts and things like that. They're a much shorter chain omega-3, and the conversion rate is not sufficient enough to bring these longer chain omega-3 fatty acids into our diet. It's just not sufficient. Over time and over evolution, we've lost the enzyme that helps bring that conversion down to these longer chains. So it doesn't matter how many walnuts and how many chia seeds you're going to be eating, you won't be getting these essential long chain omega-3 fatty acids. So if that is you as a vegetarian or someone who doesn't like fish, try and opt for a supplement, an algae supplement. So
can you put in our notes after our
yeah,
live a link,
yeah.
or you can't do links to this page, but a name of a supplement and where you can buy them?
Yeah. If you just type as well algae supplements, I can obviously give some recommendations. But the oily fish actually eat the algae, and that's where they get these longer chain omega-3s from.
So it's
that's why, yeah.
chain,
But obviously,
chain and chain.
exactly. But obviously, as humans, we don't tend to eat algae, so that's why we have the fish that eat the algae, and that's how we source it. So yeah. So if you don't want to eat oily fish, or you're a vegan or vegetarian, then definitely look at algae supplements, and they're really, really important.
And Natasha Mendelsohn saying, I've seen that some people are now calling the gut the second brain, and that's true.
Yeah.
They really are.
They really are. They really are. Because all of our neurotransmitters are made here. That, our serotonin, our dopamine, all of these things aren't actually made within our brain. They're made within our gut. And we know that the people that have a better gut diversity, that eat more fiber, that have more colors in their diet, that have more plant-based foods, they actually have a more diverse gut microbiome. And these gut microbiome help make these neurotransmitters. So that's why we're always talking about, having more plant-based produce, having more whole food produce, and having more color within your everyday diet. That's why it's really important.
Fantastic. And just to let's talk about the Be Well Collective.
Yeah.
So tell us about that and how it works and who it helps, and if people want to be involved, how they might be involved.
We'd love you all to be involved. Every single person in the group needs to be our collective. Yeah, we are a mental health organisation for everybody. So we started off, in the stylish roots of the fashion industry to try and obviously bring some help and support into an industry where I saw it lacking incredibly. It was very.
And was that advice about eating and eating disorders and mental health, or what's the underlying aim, as it were?
So when we started it, the underlying aim was actually just to bring in some support. So when I was younger, I was pushed straight into the fashion industry, living in New York, living in Paris, having high demands on my body, being given a range of different sizes, and actually never having any idea of how I eat and how I maintain my shape, how I exercise. No advice was ever given to me. And you can see very poor eating disorders happen because of this, because of the pressure that's given on you. And actually now, I mean, this is going back a while ago because I'm much older than I was when I started. And when I started, there was no social media. There was no really any comparison. You compare yourself to people at school. I mean, that was my comparison, or to a magazine. But I didn't have a daily comparison. Whereas now,
you can have a minute comparison. I mean, moment to moment. Yeah.
Exactly. Every single person is now, today, living what I was living when I was 16, 17, 18. Every time you turn on your phone, you are comparing yourself to someone. And it's such a negative headspace to be in. Yeah. And so actually, and also, not only that, you're bombarded with what you should eat, what you shouldn't eat, how you should look, how long are your legs, how tight is your six-pack for men and women. And you have people, adopting their own and photoshopping their own pictures and putting them on and doing wonderful angles that make them look a completely different size.
But not truthful.
And aren't truthful. And, that's how I found myself being in an industry that was quite niche, very young. But now that's eloped with the whole nation. We're always comparing ourselves to someone. So actually the Be Well Collective started to work in that industry to try and bring some structure and support of mental health, of eating, of where to get sustainable expert advice as opposed to faddy diets and things like that, and where to source the correct experts. And then we brought in mentoring programs to help, and online resources. And then as it grew and as COVID hit, I realized actually this is where it started, but this is where it needs to end. And we need to really diversify all of our mental health support to everybody. So now we are, fully within the UK. We don't just work within the creative industry. So now we put on workshops, we put on big events, we do monthly webinars, and, we really try to offer, that one-to-one direct support through the Be Well Collective for people with nutrition and health advice. So, and if you look at where nutrition started, and you look at everyone's relationship with food, that does have a mental health side angle to it. So we all of us have a deep emotional connection with food in one way or another. You don't have to have an eating disorder. And there is a range of spectrums of eating disorders. It's not just anorexia, nervosa, or bulimia. Bulimia, you know, it's clean eating, it's worrying about only eating a certain way or timings of food. But we all have an emotional connection, you know, we all crave. I'm sure you have like a couple of dishes that when you're feeling a bit low and a bit, I've had a really crap day, all I want is X. Yeah.
Hobnobs.
Hobnobs. That's your like
Cup of tea and a hobnob. Yeah.
Exactly. And like understanding like that's actually, you know, a positive outlook. You know, you've got your things that actually you can put there to give you comfort and warmth in those times of need. But recognizing when it's unhealthy is also really important. So, you know, nutrition is massively related to mental health. So it's why we are an overarching mental health organization.
I mean, it sounds amazing, and I'm sure everyone listening will want to go online just to find out the events that you're doing, but also the resources that you're offering for themselves and their families and schools, I guess. I tell you something that you know, as a therapist of over 30 years, I still don't fully understand, but I guess I make a suggestion and see what you think, is that our connection with using food as comfort and as a treat. So people, you know, they sort of binge, or they decide, you know, like me, it's a hobnob. Do you think connecting food as comfort is related to our babyhood as breastfeeding? Because that's where we first got comfort and were first held, but we were also fed.
Well, I think I mean, I'm not sure. I'm thinking about it. That would make logical sense. But I think a lot of our reward comes from, you know, we're taught this is good, this is bad. If you're good, you'll get a reward of food. And so when
we're for children, like you can have sweets if you do your homework, or
exactly. And if you finish this off, you can get dessert. You're always rewarded with, I don't know, if you get a very good grade, you can go and pick what you want from the shop in terms of food wise. On your birthday, you can have specific
cake.
My mother always gave me fizzy pop only on my birthday, once a year. And so for me, I was like, this is such a massive treat that actually when I didn't have my mum telling me I couldn't have this, all I wanted was a Coke, because, you know, that was a treat. That was, you know, me going, well, I can have this.
So it's associated, it's the emotion associated with the behavior.
Exactly. And so I think, you know, when we're taught wrong from right and rewarded with food as a young child, you know, that does really develop into our adulthood. And it's the same thing as I remember when I was feeling really ill, you know, my mum would always want to give me one of my favorite dishes, which was fajitas, which is what I loved. And so now I always really crave fajitas when I'm kind of feeling low, because that's something that my mum would give me when I was younger. And so there's all these kind of small things that we adopt through childhood that we definitely take into our adulthood.
It's so complicated though, because there's nothing lovelier than feeding your children and food being an expression of love and care, and that when you're ill you give them fajitas or chicken soup or whatever your family is.
Yeah.
And then now having this lens, oh my God, am I setting up, you know, a negative relationship with my child? And you know, it's like nothing is free, right?
It's true. And you can't really think about this too much, but I think, you know, if you're only seeking those foods when you feel a bit low, then that's completely fine. It's when it becomes a daily habit. So when it's, you know, I remember once getting a McDonald's when I was younger, and blew my mind because I'd never had anything like that. And, you know, now I don't crave that at all. But there are certain things within that I remember being really comforting, and it's not a daily basis that I crave it. It's just when I want that small bit of comfort. But when
and that's fine, isn't it? That's what you're saying. Is every now and again.
Fine. If you think about it, like, food is such a big part of culture. It's social aspect.
Rituals, Christmas, birthdays, celebration.
And we need to make sure we enjoy that part. Like, we really need to make sure that we don't look at that on a negative lens. Like, this is actually part of our society, our culture, who we are, who makes us different.
And how we come together.
And that's a really beautiful thing. The part when it can become actually destructive is when it controls our minds 24/7. It's when all we think about is that one thing. It's when we deny ourselves that pleasure and then actually overcompensate in other areas. It's when it actually starts becoming detrimental to our health. Maybe there's
But it's ruling us.
Exactly.
We don't have choices anymore.
And that's the difference. Yeah. And so I think that's the most important kind of takeaway, actually.
Balance. It's like
Yeah,
everyone I speak to, including myself, it's balance, that we want balance.
it is. But
So,
sadly, that doesn't sound millions of pounds, does it, in the shops? Or advice. You know, it's a simple, it's actually kind of like, I was speaking to Giles Yeo, who's a geneticist at Cambridge, who talks a lot about fatty diets. And, you know, his kind of simple answer in my podcast the other week was, everything is balanced, but I can't write that because I don't sell books. And it's like, it's true, you know, when you...
that's so terrible.
Yeah, well, he does end up
Of
writing
course,
it.
and I don't mean him, but
Yeah,
isn't it like
I
you
know.
need the new thing, the new kid on the block, the new
Yeah.
idea, the new diet, because that
But if you
sells.
kind of think, like, you know, we're lazy, so if I can buy this and look like this, great. Or do I have to look every single day at the balanced diet that I'm eating? That is so unexciting as a consumer. I don't want to know. But actually, if I go to this side and I buy this one thing at an extortionate price, then apparently it's going to make me like this, and I'll definitely go this way, because our brain does not want to think about it. And it's, you know, there's such clever marketing out there.
So my last question, because we've only got half an hour, and it's so interesting. I love your page, by the way. I love the recipes. I love your tips. I love all the stuff you've done. I recommend your page. People want to develop new habits for themselves and change their relationship with food. Your page is a really good place to start.
Thank you.
But for 2022, what are your kind of intentions for yourself, and how you would like to kind of set yourself and maybe your patients and all of us for the year?
It's a really good question. Do you know what? It's actually not a good time, because I spent, which is something I don't normally do too much of, I try to do a lot of reflection, but it can be very hard to carve that time out for yourself when you run a business and say, like, what are my intentions for the next year? And actually, I find that to be one of the most effective things you can do to set up your year, and how you actually want to do, what you want to do for yourself, not just professionally, but personally, in lots of different areas.
And just describe the difference between an intention and a goal, because we can get very muddled.
We can get very muddled. An intention is more kind of your emotional state of where you want to put yourself, really. It's kind of looking at your real needs as opposed to things that you have to go and achieve. So a goal is like, by the next date, I want to make sure that I have achieved this. Whereas an intention is something like, I would do this because it makes me feel really good every day. And so for me, my intention is looking at my time management. So if you look at something like, why give somebody a food diary? I give them a food diary to write down every single thing that they're eating, to reflect back. And it's more of a process of that patient's reflection, actually, on being aware of how much they're consuming or how little they're consuming, and actually how much of the processed foods they're consuming. And when somebody starts to do that, they start setting intentions of like, wow, am I drinking that much coffee a day? Or am I eating that much chocolate in a day? Or actually, I'm not consuming half of the amount of what I thought I did. And so there becomes a bit of a realization with oneself. And if you do, and what I'm trying to do is that for time, is actually seeing how much of my time am I being efficient in? Am I spending my time successfully or unsuccessfully? So trying to write down every day how I'm making my time, and how much am I on my phone? How much am I really checking my or am I putting that to a side and making sure I'm concentrating on my work? And I think when you do something like a time diary, you actually really become aware of all this free time, all this wasted time that you're not using efficiently. And so for me, like, my intention is to become much more efficient with my time and my use of time, because time is the one thing that we don't have much of. And something that COVID taught me, and the reflection of 2021, is that when everything stopped, we seem to have a lot more time in our hands to actually put our work to things that were really meaningful. And so I want to make sure that that's a 2022 intention.
Good for you. And also within that, I'm sure it's making sure that you have time off, that this kind of 24/7 work, playing with our phones, working at our office in our phone culture is so bad for us, that boundaries and having time not working is actually gives us much more creativity, and we sleep better and eat better, and all of that. So I'm sure it'll be really interesting to have a look. Are you doing it for a month and then going to kind of reset?
And then reset. And I think, you know, sometimes you see your screen time and you think, my screen time's 5 hours. And you think, you know, that could be a flight to Dubai nearly. You know, that's time just spent flying to another country. And I spent that on my phone.
Yeah.
And so actually like setting your intentions to how much time you're using efficiently, I think is actually really important, because it's time you can't get back. So
Time you can't get back. How you spend your day is how you spend your life.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and that 40,000 weeks, is it 40,000 weeks? That gives us a bit of a wake-up call. That's how long we've got. And so just to finish, Play to Heal, this is exactly what I needed to hear. I've set up a new baby therapy business and juggling a secretary employed, something employed life. And I will also, sorry, I can't read.
Also on financial security, I will absolutely take
Okay.
intentions. Oh, that's really nice to hear. Well, I'm glad that at least one thing I said touched someone. So
I think a lot
that
of
is
what you
the main
said.
message. Yeah.
I mean, what I've taken from you is how deep and embedded our relationship with food is, and that we need to understand for ourselves what our relationship is and how we can use it healthily and freely to enjoy and celebrate our life and not to punish us. And that
Absolutely.
part of that is, having diversity in our food, but also not punishing ourselves from stopping ourselves to have treats now and again, that it is about kind of balance.
It is. Enjoy that part. I think that's the most important thing, to never feel ashamed or guilt or anything attached to it. Like, enjoy that. Like, make that something that you love and you're going to cherish it every mouthful. I think that's so important, because that does also give us pleasure.
It really does. I mean, I really love food. I'm really greedy.
What's your favourite food? What's kind of your favourite dish, apart from a hobnob, which is your snack?
That's my comfort. I've actually, surprisingly, I have a very healthy relationship with food. So I love a big diverse mix. I love big massive salads with lots of different grains and lots of different vegetables and kind of fruit. But I also love a steak and baked potato and broccoli. So I mean, I like it all.
Yeah. But that all just sounds really diverse to me. So that sounds fantastic. You're getting
I
all of your
don't binge and I don't diet.
Great. Fantastic. That should be most people's intentions, to not get sucked into diets. And
Diets are so bad for you, aren't they? But also, I know when I have dieted, it means I then eat like for 10 men for about 10 days. It's so bad for me. I really hate who I become. So,
well, if you tell yourself you can't have something, all you'll think about is that food. All you'll think about is that you'll become obsessed by it. And so actually just allowing yourself to have something. And I always just say, if you are that person that has the tendency just to kind of snack, which I actually am, something I found out with COVID. I think I'm normally so busy that I'm not the biggest snacker, but at home I was like, ooh, and I always like having nice food out. It's a big kind of ritual in my life. So I would just constantly be in the fridge, and I'd be like, this is really on me, because I'm also just sat in one place all the time. So I kind of think, if you are that person that has the temptation like me to constantly go in to the cookie jar or into the chocolate box, just don't have it in your house.
Yeah.
And then and if you think about it, I keep telling you how lazy our brains, but you'll know this as a therapist and studying this side, our brain doesn't like to adapt to change. So if you're sat indoors and and you're not hungry, but you're like, I quite fancy something, and you've got a whole chocolate box round the corner, like this, you will just go and get it. If you know that you could walk, go and put your shoes on, put your jacket on, put your socks on, walk 10 minutes to the shop, get that. You're just not going to do it unless you really need it. Unless you're kind of like, no, I have a real craving, I will go. And your brain will go, okay, we're going to go. But actually, you won't do. So it's all these kind of like small things that you can do as well, just to kind of
really help.
Mindful of, well, if I'm putting it in front of myself, it's so hard to say no. But if I have to go and walk in the cold for 10 minutes to get it, then I must really need it. So maybe I'll do that.
And to end hands on Hexham is mirroring what you're saying. Eating mindfully is extremely helpful. Yeah. It really is. But thank you so much, Sarah. And it's been lovely talking to you. And there's so much that you've said that's incredibly helpful. I recommend everyone goes to your page and listens to your podcast. And also the Be Well Collective. You can you'll put a link in that in my notes. I'll put a link in that into my notes.
Yes, Be Well Collective, and the podcast is called Live Well, Be Well, and we are just about to start recording the season 7, but you've got about 100 episodes if you've not listened to it to go and source through. So yeah.
And also, obviously, to come and see you as a nutritionist.
Yes, yes, please do. It's actually, I think a lot of people have kicked off with that as their intention in 2022. So always love welcoming more people into my clinic. So
fantastic. Well, I hope we'll stay in touch and we'll speak soon. Love you.
Yes,
Have a good evening,
lovely
everyone.
to see you.
Thank you,
Happy
everyone who joined us and for
Thank you.
participating and for being with us. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.